welcome everybody here to our panel. We decided, this topic comes up so often, and the days of having university scale cultivar evaluations are really long gone. Most of this work is being done by the industry, by nurseries, and by growers. And so in order to get the best information out there, we kind of need to have some grower to grower sharing. So we invited a couple of, I think we could call Bill a grower as well, growers and grower representatives from the industry. So we have three people who will be talking today, starting with Andre Tougas from Tougas Farm in Northborough, Massachusetts. Bill Pitts from Bill Pitts Consulting, and out in Western New York, I forget what town you're in, but well affiliated with Waffler Nursery. You probably have interacted with them a bit through there. We're going to start with a conversation between the two of them with some, and I'll kind of moderate that. And then we'll follow up with Dr. Renae Moran from University of Maine. So without further ado, I'm going to step aside, and Andre, why don't we start things off with you? Some of your thoughts on cultivars of interest on your farm, and maybe describe your farm a little bit.
All right. Hi, I'm Andre Tougas from Tougas Farm in Northborough. We're in central Massachusetts, about 45 minutes west of Boston. We're about a 120-acre farm. Retail, 75% U-pick, 25% through our retail farm stand. We're open June through November. We grow 8 acres of strawberries, 8 acres of blueberries, 5 acres of cherries, ½ acre of blackberries, 4 acres of peaches and nectarines, 20 acres of apples, and 5 to 10 acres of pumpkins, depending on our crop rotation. Do you want me to keep going in what varieties we're growing?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to hear the arc of where things were at, maybe when you started, or maybe when your dad started, and then kind of what got you here. I mean, in 5 minutes, sure, max, right?
So my parents came here in 1981. Over the years, they've with me as well, have consolidated the three farms together. They started with about 58 acres to start, purchasing the 2 farms next door to us. It was just apples and peaches when they started, standard apples, Max, Cortland's, and Red Delicious, I believe, is all they had for apples. And they had a lot of peaches, but most of them were pretty low production old orchards that were dying. They first added strawberries to the mix, and then they added blueberries and pumpkins. And then when I came back from college in 2003, well, we had just started growing a few cherries before that. We added a few more cherries after that. Blackberries have been on and off in production over the years. We added a bakery in '91, where we can use some of our excess production. And then we added our farm store around 2007. We added a bigger farm store. So that about covers the general history.
So when I think about, you mentioned standard trees, and we think about your farm, and I think a lot of the replanting was done to change systems.
Yep.
As you change rootstocks, of course, you start to change. This is your one shot to change the varieties. Where do you think things went in terms of your market, and how you decided what varieties to put in the ground as things change? I know some of this happened while you were in grade school, but you were around to think about it, and it continues.
I mean, the orchard has been replanted at least twice at this point, I would say. I think there's only one block is still in production from when I came back to the farm, or that was planted before I came back to the farm. So we're on about a 15-year replant cycle. And my dad was very involved with the is very involved with the International Fruit Tree Association. So he's been very enthusiastic about replanting to higher density orchards. Right now we're planting either tall spindle or super spindle for everything on a 9 equivalent rootstock. Although everything we've planted the last few years has been on Geneva rootstocks. We try to, for our variety mix, try to have a good mix of varieties starting in mid-August and going through until the end of harvest, which would be in late October, early November. We like to have a mix of yellow, red, and bicolor apples throughout the season, as well as a good cooking apple to go in every season as well.
So how many varieties are you at now? And do you find that the customers want more or want something different?
Yeah, our customers do like to try new apple varieties. We have about 30, I think, now. And we are trying to plant the newest varieties. Our largest portion of our orchard is in Honeycrisp at this point. It's also the most challenging, but it is what the customers are demanding right now. So we're looking for down the road to see what will be a little more grower friendly and also be in good demand by our customers. So we're looking towards some of the new varieties to fill that hole and try to shift some of the production out of Honeycrisp eventually.
Great. That might be a good segue to introduce Bill, who's, I think, got his finger on the pulse of the newer varieties that are out there. And I think you've got some material ready to help kind of lay out some of the materials out there. So Bill Pitts Consulting, maybe you want to give a quick 30-second rundown of what you do and then go into it.
I was formerly from Waffler Nursery. I was there for 42 years. And I was a nursery manager for 25 or 26 years. We haven't quite got that figured out yet, but I grew about 800,000 trees a year, all basically apple trees and a few pear trees. We also had 500 acres of orchard, so I got a good experience in both areas there. I have retired off of there this spring, and now I work for myself and for MEI as a consultant. With that part of the business, I do anything with them on the growing end of things, but also with the crosses and these new seedlings that we're putting out, evaluating new fruit, budwood, and just about anything that has to do with the growing end of things in the MEI. My consulting business, I started just out of a need to, to stay kind of busy after working pretty steady for my whole life. And it's turned out pretty good. I've set up some U-picks. I've been around to several farmers in the area and out through all over the United States, basically. But in the Midwest, I spent a bunch of time setting up orchards, teaching people to trim, root stock selection, variety selections, trellising, psychiatrist, psychologist. I've been doing it all, so it's been kind of interesting.
Great. So yeah, you're kind of on the inside, and I think particularly, in order to have trees, you got to have a nursery industry with things in the pipeline. So you want to open up your screen and chat about some of the things that are in the pipeline?
Sure. So Evercrisp was one of the first ones that was developed out of the MEI. And that one was it came out originally as a crisp apple, and it's been widely planted across the United States, even and it's clubbed overseas. So several organizations, or one organization, has got it overseas. So but it has been planted in our area quite a bit and is becoming a commercial variety. Had a tough time taking off a little bit, but I like it because it's sweet and it's crispy, and the good part about it is it's late and it's out of the season, but the bad part about it is late and it's out of season. So for U-pick, it's extremely late, but some of the U-pick guys have actually got some people coming back in that are interested in it. The next variety I'd like to talk about, Rosalie. I like this variety. I think it's going to be a good U-pick apple. Commercially, I think it's got too thin a skin to actually be commercially, because when you run over a packing line, it doesn't do very well. It bruises quite easily with a thin skin. It is a good keeper. I do like the flavor of it. It gets this floral flavor to it. It's very easy to eat. It's light and airy like Honeycrisp. So I do like that one. It comes about 2 weeks after Golden Delicious. So it is later too. Most people are picking it a week after Golden's. And then the next one I would talk about would be Sweet Zinger. That's also a couple weeks after Golden Delicious. So these are later varieties. It is a Gold Rush cross, so it has that, people that have Gold Rush have that Gold Rush flavor. It does have a little bit better texture than the Gold Rush, but is hard and is sweet. And it's a yellow apple that gets yellow, stays yellow down south sometimes, but it does get a blush up here in the north, and sometimes we can get 50% color on it. So next one I'd like to talk about is Ludicrous. Ludicrous is one of the newer ones coming out. Quite a few people have planted some trees. Only 2 or 3 have planted quite a few trees for commercial. And there's some apples out there that are getting out there now. It's a really unique flavor to the apple. It's probably the most flavorful apple that I know of. It's got 3 flavor esters in it. So all different people try this apple and they get all different flavors from it. I personally am not really fond of it off the tree because it is kind of tart right off the tree. But then after a couple of weeks, it melts out and it gets these unique flavors to it. And I think there's something to it with sweet cider too. It makes really great sweet cider, and we've made some hard cider out of it, and that's been very impressive. Some of the flavor esters have actually come through in the hard cider. So not that you want to plant varieties for hard cider, but I think this one is a pretty good one for that also. So the next one I would like to talk about is Sweet Mayan. That is the newest one that's on there. Sweet Maya came out. It's a wine crisp cross, and comes extremely early. It comes at zestar time. The good part about that is it is before everything else. So some people are planting this thing in very, very early into there. Now I can read. It's coming in very early. But they're also spraying some retain on it to drag it out, and actually you can drag this thing out even into Honeycrisp time. It will hang on a tree, it doesn't fall. It's just not an apple you want to store for a long time. I think it loses flavor around Christmas time, but don't forget it's also picked in August. So there's been a lot of interest in this one, especially in the pick your own. It's a pretty good apple to get in, and it kind of falls in between like Premier Honeycrisp and Honeycrisp. So I think it's a really good one on there for some people to try. It does grow a tall, nice tree. I do think it's going to take off and be pretty good, but it's got a ways to go but in pick your own farm markets, I think it's right up their alley. So the other one I want to talk about, Somerset. Somerset comes at Honeycrisp time. And I kind of hit the nursery end of things. I said, nah, this thing isn't going to fly. And it is, the tree wants to grow. It's very strong growing in the nursery, so you need to put it on weaker rootstocks and stuff. But I like it. I like the flavor better than Honeycrisp. I'm not a big Honeycrisp. I like the texture and stuff, but the flavor in this apple, and this apple is like Honeycrisp. It's a little bigger. It gets pretty good color, and it doesn't seem to get the bitter pit as much. I've seen some bitter pit, but nothing like Honeycrisp. A couple I really don't want to touch too much is a Crunch Bunch and Baker's Delights. The Crunch Bunch is yellow apple, comes just after Golden Delicious, and the Baker's Delight, it's a Sweet 16 Gold Rush cross, and that ripens just after Honeycrisp. I'm not going to spend too much time on there. The next 2 I want to talk about are New York varieties that were clubbed by Crunch Time apple growers. This is Snapdragon and Ruby Frost. They have opened them up to people to buy into it, and it's quite a chunk of money. So if you're looking for 50 trees or 100 trees, it's not worth it. But if you start looking to put an acre in a U-pick, and it's only open for U-pick or farm markets. So Snapdragon does bloom middle season, but it comes about a week before golden. So between Honeycrisp and golden time, without retain. A lot of people in New York put your retain on it just to drag it out. I think this is a great variety because it's a good fit. With all these new varieties, this kind of fits right in the harvest window where MAI doesn't have varieties that are coming out in that time. So Ruby Frost, I like the apple. I don't like the apple off the tree. It's a little too tart for me again, but it does mellow out. It's one of my favorite apples in April, in March and April. It's one of the most sensitive fire blight varieties that I know of. So be very careful. After a tree gets 3 or 4 years old, it seems to calm down really good. And the new releases out of Cornell, they're open to everybody. There's just a royalty on them at the nursery end of things, but they are open to everybody. It's Pink Luster. Pink Luster comes in before, it's just after the Sweet Maya, so between maybe a week before Gala, right through Gala. I do like this one. It's attractive. It's probably the best one, I think, out of this bunch. I like the way the crispy and the crunchy off the tree. It's medium size, and it does harvest around Gala time. So the Firecracker is one. It's a little later. That comes just before Golden's. I think it's just a hard cider variety. It's got a unique flavor. It's got a lot of flavor in it, but it rusts up pretty good. And then the Cordera is disease resistant one that comes just after Honeycrisp. It is low vigor. You need to step it up with a rootstock on that. It gets a little bitter pit, does bloom late, but it does hang on a tree. So I think there's maybe a possibility in organic situations that would be good. Other varieties to think about, I thought I'd mention Pixie Crunch. It's just after Honeycrisp. Quite a few Midwest pick your owns have got this variety in. And they do fairly well with it. It's a smaller apple. It's not a big one, but it's been good for kids' lunchbox and stuff. A real sweet apple and crisp. Kinder Crisp is another one I mentioned. There's not too many out there, but I have quite a few questions. Crimson Crisp, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that because most people know what Crimson Crisp is now. The new one out of Adams County Nursery is Ruby Rush. I don't know anything about this apple. I put it there because there has been some questions about it, and I think it fits maybe in there in the picking range. And Barnesby Pink Lady, it's an earlier Pink Lady that comes in maybe 2 weeks after Golden's, 3 weeks after Golden's. So brings the people in the north here, they can pick Pink Ladies now with it. The commercial varieties that I just wanted to mention, I'm not going to go through each one, but the Galen BL14, and which is a regular season Gala, and then there's Wildfire Gala, which is a very early Gala. It's actually earlier even than Zestar here, so it's a fairly early variety. The Honeycrisp, most everybody's planting Roll Red or Roseland Red or Firestorm. Those three are the redder strings. And the Fuji's, either Fuji Supreme or the Aztec are the ones people are planting. And that's it.
Thank you. I think you mentioned, nurseryman, you've got a certain vocabulary that I think we want to maybe explain to some of the folks here. Thinking about clubbed, so let's explain clubbing, and then let's talk a bit about Maya and just what Maya is and kind of the focus there.
Yeah. So clubs came about a long time ago. I don't know when they came back in. I think it was in maybe early 2000s, late 90s, I think. And what they went around and to some of the bigger farmers and some of the bigger packers and took apples coming out of breeding programs and clubbed them. So they organized it. So you had to belong to this and put up a bunch of money to get into these, to plant them. And I'll bring up Sweet Tangos, one of them, and that was probably the most successful one out there that I know of anyway. And it's taken off and everything, and they've kind of restricted, the number of trees going in and the number of fruit being produced, and so very controlled, and that's what a club is. MAI was actually founded by three guys that could see the writing on the wall, that in the Midwest, those people were going to be left out, and the smaller growers and you pick guys were going to be left out of these clubs. So that's how the MAI, Midwest Apple Improvement Association, started, just so they would have varieties. And I think they hit a home run with the Evercrisp to start out with. I don't think they ever thought in a million years they'd have a variety that's going to be that popular that quick. But the best thing is they're starting to fill in these picking gaps that with some of these varieties, I think it's good additions to go in between the fruit they have already. So if you are looking at any of these varieties that I mentioned, you know, the best thing about it, especially with picking your own farm market, is just make sure you can fill in some of these gaps. And I think that's what they targeted the most, was that crispy, the crunchy, the texture, and not so much on appearance, the MAI.
Yeah. So if the clubbing is basically a licensing program, often
Yes.
for wholesale varieties.
Yes.
A lot of people, this is, you know, mostly New England, but not entirely.
Yes.
I would surmise that 80% of the people on this are pick your own, if not more, and
Yes.
haven't had access. Can you speak a little bit to the availability? You mentioned that people might be able to get Ruby Frost or some of the others that are
Yes.
Snapdragon and get access to them.
Right.
How would one of these growers get access to a club
Well,
variety?
After I post my my PowerPoint, there'll actually be a contact there, but you can get a hold of Crunch Time. There's a lady named Jessica Wells. I'll put the number in there and stuff, and you can get a hold of her. Like I said, it is very expensive, and it's not something that, you know, you should look at, but I think there's a few people that are probably on here that have it outside of New York. So I think it's worth it if you're going to plant a bunch of trees. It's the same cost whether you plant 50 trees or not the same cost, almost the same cost the startup cost is. So, you know, where MAI has started out and they went more geared up for the smaller people, and their startup cost is $100 to get in. You go ahead and buy trees, and you pay a royalty, and then later on they got a trademark fee for 20 cents and 30 cents a tree later on in life. So it's a lot cheaper, more economical than Snapdragon, unless you plant a bunch of Snapdragons and get up near your allotment there.
Yep. Andre, you've put a few of these in the ground, the Mayas. Maybe be worth hearing from someone who interfaces with the customers. What are they asking for? Are they looking for you know, Snapdragon or Ruby Frost? And I guess at some point we'll have to pop the bubble of Cosmic Crisp and how you steer someone who's asking for that towards something else.
We've had a few people ask for Snapdragon. We have some customers that are from New York that have asked for it. Not a ton of people. No, I don't think anyone's asked for Ruby Frost. I've ordered Snapdragon. I haven't ordered Ruby Frost. I think the high degree of fire blight susceptibility on Ruby Frost is going to make it undesirable to plant it. And it's not that much different from other bicolor varieties, red and white, or red and yellow, excuse me, red and green varieties. So Snapdragon is one that we've got on order coming in 23. We have a few thousand Evercrisp trees planted. We also planted Ludacrisp and Rosalie last year. I like the Evercrisp, but that's probably my favorite apple, and it does eat well all the way until the time that we start picking strawberries. What good it does for me is yet to be seen. We're open until Thanksgiving usually. This year we opened a few weekends in December afterwards. It does store exceptionally well, and customers have come back for it once they've tried it, if they come late enough in the season to actually try it. And I think it's a fantastic apple. It's just too late for the big crowds that we get during September and October. It does help bring people back after Columbus Day weekend though. So we're hoping to find some better varieties to fill the picking season in September and October as well. And maybe some of the new ones coming down the line from MAIA will help fill that gap. We have the Sweet Mayas coming this spring to plant. So that'll be a good early season apple to have But I think the best quality apples that we're going to get in the future are all going to require an additional investment more than just the per tree royalty. So the best varieties are all going to require an initiation fee and probably a per year royalty on top of just the tree royalties. I planted the New York Tier 2 varieties, the Pink Luster, Firecracker, and Cordoba. And I removed most of them. I wasn't too impressed with them. The Pink Luster is probably the best of those three for a pick your own orchard, but I needed room for ginger golds that we had ordered. So they were kind of in my way after I planted them. I wasn't too impressed with the Firecracker and Cordoba, and they were pretty biennial from the start, even after just a few years. So we took them out. So I'm hoping that the Tier 1 varieties are what we're going to go with in the future.
Great. Bill, if you could advance your slides 2 up so we can see that calendar. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. This kind of gives a sense of what we're looking at. And we're still seeing, I've worked in the pick your own business, including at Andre's farm years ago. And there's a gap that we often have in that between Zestar and Gala Macintosh. And is there anything that we can kind of count on, the Labor Day gap that I think a lot of us are familiar with? What's your recommendations for that?
Well, I'm biased because I work for MAI, but we've had Sweet Maya out for a few years now. And what we found is we can pick that thing as Zestar, but we can also take, at this one farm, we took about half and sprayed retain on them. And what we found is we can drag that thing way up into Honeycrisp time, actually, if we wanted to, and still get the flavor and crunchy. It doesn't fall off the tree like some of the other early varieties. So I like that as a filler, and Pink Luster too. I like that one to go right through there. There's not a lot else, I mean, right in that area as far as high quality apples. I think those two are probably going to be the best.
Yeah, great. So we're still looking at a combination of PGRs to help, stretch, push things into maybe different zones.
Exactly.
I'm a lifelong New Englander. We still have a certain affinity for certain varieties, even though those of us who are used to older varieties are getting older and the crowd's kind of thinning out. But where do the traditional New England varieties, the Macintosh family, fit into this? Andre, what do you have for people asking for things?
Well, Macintosh is good in early September. And then the demand for it really falls off, especially once Honeycrisp is picking. Even Gala is hard to sell once Honeycrisp is picking. So we have Max, but actually, in fact, yesterday I sent off a bunch of my Max for juice because they've been hanging out in my cooler since September. So every year we take out more and more Max, and we've planted all Ruby Max and Linda Max at this point. So they're nice, real good quality, good color, but the demand is just falling off for them. So McCowan's a better version of Mac, in my opinion. Picks obviously in late September, early October, and stores a little bit better. So we have some decent demand for McCowan, and Cortland as a cooking apple has some demand as well. Although we've been cooking with more McCowans in our bakery lately. They're easier to grow. The Cortlands are just pretty lanky and too big for our peeling machines. So
easier to grow than Cortland, you're saying?
Yes, they're easier to grow than Cortland. Yeah. Now with a good return bloom program, they crop annually. It used to be the more difficult variety that my dad was growing, but now it's much easier compared to Honeycrisp, at least. Empire has some demand, but it's just a small piece of the pie at this point in our variety mix.
And I think with the UPIC operations that I set up, it's kind of hard for me because I want to tell them they need to plant all new varieties, and it's just the opposite. They need to still plant Max and Cortlands and Empires and all the way through, so they have this season long apples, and it's so hard for me because I want them to plant sweet Maya, and 30% of their farm should be, or 40% of their farm should be Honeycrisp, and it's really hard when I set up orchards to make sure I try to talk these people into planting 100 trees of Max and Cortlands and McCollins, and just so they don't forget about them, because there's still quite a few people and there's still a demand there that when they go to these U-pick operations, they want to still pick Max and McCollins and Cortlands.
Yeah, but the demand is lessening, though. It's not increasing for sure for those varieties.
So are we putting too many eggs in the basket of Honeycrisp?
Not right now.
I say, because of the production challenges, the bienniality, the storage, the bitter pit. We all know the relatively speaking low yields compared to some of the others. Where does it leave us? It's the apple we hate to grow but love to sell.
Well, it's you're speaking at the farmer end of things, when we really dislike the thing growing, but then you talk to your customers and they like the apple, and they know the name, and the name is huge, because if you look at some of these other ones coming in, and Somerset is a good example, comes about the same time, but it's called Somerset. People don't know it. They know Honeycrisp now. And I still want to get people so they don't grow a lot of Honeycrisp, but that's their bread and butter right now. That's where they make the most money. But everybody's looking for something different because of all the problems.
Yeah,
I agree.
So what do you think we're going to see in terms of releases? I think as we're moving forward, because I was jotting these down. I got about 10 or 12 that you kind of started, and then added an extra 5 or so as kind of potentials. Do you think that in let's say 5-10 years, let's say 10 years, give the trees a chance to fully get going up and going, what we're seeing right now is going to be the mix in a retail orchard?
Well, I think this will be a mix in definitely in retail. I think you got to have a mix, and you got to have some of these newer ones. I call them 21st century apples, the crispier, the crunchier, throughout the season. And I know with MAI, and one of my jobs is to try to find 2 or 3 varieties that come in the middle, because we have nothing after Somerset and before, like even way after Golden. So we have MAI has a huge gap there, and definitely we have one we're looking at that's probably going to release in next year, and the one in the following year that are going to help fill some of that gap. But yeah, I think there's good mixtures. Do I think anything or all these are going to take over? No, I think they're just going to be additional.
Great.
If you go to the supermarket now, the shelf space is getting pretty crowded with a lot of different varieties coming from West Coast and New Zealand, and so the consumer is going to be more and more confused at what they're getting. So in terms of a retail pick your own orchard, we have the opportunity to educate them and have them try different varieties. And I don't think there's any point where a customer is more open to trying a new variety than that when they're at a pick your own orchard. I think they're most focused on apples when they're at a pick your own orchard, much more than if they're going to the grocery store and going to fill their basket with a whole round of groceries. So the opportunity is with us, pick your own growers, to be able to educate customers and give them the best quality apples. So I think we have the opportunity to build a market share for our varieties.
Yeah, and they're not going to be the same as what people see. And I think you just need to re-educate people. You're not going to see a Kiku or a Sweet Bee or whatever, some of these other things that turn out to be Fuji's, but have a different brand on them, right? That's the sort of thing we
I have good faith in the Crunch a Bunch model now that they've opened it up to more retail growers in the Northeast, especially because they've identified the value of having retail growers help market and build their market share. So I think that there's a good chance that Snapdragon can be a bigger variety than it is currently.
Great.
Yeah, I think they've had to, they've seen the need. They have farm markets and pick your owns all through here to help promote their variety on the lower end. And that's where I like the way Evercrisp came out and everything. It got in everywhere and it kind of started from the ground floor. And I agree with doing that. And I think this is why MAI varieties, they got some in here that'll take off because of that. And I think I know sit in some of the meetings and stuff, Snapdragon and will take off now that it's getting in some of the farm markets too. It's going to help.
Great. With that, I think I want to kind of shift gears and think a bit about some of the other crops that we grow in New England, even in warm parts of northern New England. I mean, the person we're about to invite in here is from northern New England in Maine, and I've certainly got a small planting of peaches at the farm. So Renae, do you want to come in and chat a bit about some of the new varieties work that you've done? And before I go there, I want to thank Andre and Bill, and we'll open this up for a kind of broader discussion after we after Renae gives her pitch.
Good afternoon, everyone. I do a lot of variety testing at Highmore Farm. I haven't done much with apples in the last 15 years. I've been distracted by plums and peaches. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that when I first started here 22 years ago, most of the new apple varieties were restricted in access. So I switched gears and went to testing varieties of stone fruit, starting with plums, which have the hardiness that we need here in Maine. But now I'm starting to focus on peaches because it was one of the fun things I would do in my research would be to plant a few peach varieties every year. And then I started to realize that, yeah, maybe we can grow peaches in Maine. So with the rest of the team here at Highmore Farm, Peyton Janakis, Greg Kohler, and with my colleague at the University of Minnesota, I've started working on peaches and a new apple variety. The peach variety trials that I've been doing have been funded by a grant from the local state government. So one of the things I love about peaches is their high value and their relatively low establishment costs. I'm not keen on the high labor costs. I have a very limited labor pool here at Highmore Farm. So one of the biggest costs associated with peaches is the fruit thinning and the repeated harvests, spot picking. But I've heard that there's a new peach thinner, so I'm kind of excited about reducing some of these high labor costs associated with growing stone fruits. Now here in Maine, growing peaches is very high risk because of the cold temperatures throughout the winter and into spring. So a major focus of my research is testing the hardiness of peach varieties. And I've been doing a collaborative project with Jeremy Delisle at UNH and a grower, Chuck Souther, and the retired George Hamilton to test 34 of their varieties for controlled studies on cold hardiness, not just observations. Maybe next year I'll report on those results. But with the money that the state of Maine gave me, I established a variety trial in 2019. I wasn't expecting to get this money, so I had to scramble to get trees to get a variety trial started. So the first few varieties that I planted were not my top choices. They were what was available from the big peach nursery, Adams County. At the same time that I ordered these trees, I ordered some of my top choices based on bacteria leaf spot resistance and estimated flower bud cold hardiness. And those I planted this year. But this year in 2021, the first variety trial started to produce fruit. And I'm going to be talking about these varieties because I had a chance to do taste tests and measure yield in these trees. These are the varieties that I planted in the two different trials. A lot of the varieties come out of Rutgers University's breeding program and the Stellar series from the Midwest and the older PF series. We had a dry spell at the beginning of this summer, and this had a big impact on fruit quality, especially in peaches. And some of the varieties that we normally experience as super great flavored peaches were not necessarily like that this year. So when I talk about these results, bear in mind that these are preliminary results, and some of the quality that I experienced may have been impacted by this early dry spell. At Highmore Farm, we have limited ability to irrigate. For some reason, there's just no groundwater here. And what little groundwater we do have goes to irrigate the vegetables. The first to ripen in this year was a variety called Manon or Manon. I think it's a French name. This one's from Rutgers, and I picked my first ones in late July. I noticed that the trees had small fruit size and white flesh, and it was a clingstone. I like the fact that I could pick peaches in July, so I'm going to keep my eye on this variety. I thought the quality was fair, but I'm not going to give up on it this soon. Next one was a donut peach, a flat peach called Tangos. This also is from Rutgers University. We picked it in early August. The size is small on these donut peaches. That's one thing I don't like about them. One thing I do like about them is they may have better flower bud hardiness than the more traditional peaches. This one was a clingstone. It had fairly firm flesh. I really liked the flavor of this, but I did not like the way it looked. It had a dull color. So I estimated the yield per acre. This was one of the better trees that we got from the nursery, really good, strong trees. So this one had some of the better yield in this first trial. The other donut peach I've been testing is Buenos 2. This one I think had better flavor than the Tangos, better appearance, but it was prone to blossom end splitting. And split pits, two very undesirable traits. It just didn't hold up that well once it was harvested, but I thought it had great flavor. Blazing Star, this had the highest yield this first year. This is out of the Stellar series, ripening in Red Haven season. I liked its appearance, nice bright orange flesh and red peel. Flavor was average, and I thought it had a tough peel. PF15 was one of my favorites in terms of flavor. This one was mid-August, about the same time. Medium to large size. I liked the way it looked, and I thought it was more consistent in its quality than some of the other varieties. Lucky 13 was about the same time. Not as brilliant orange flesh, milder in flavor, and it had a tough peel. So I think I preferred the other one over this one. But you know, whenever I've been doing variety trials, I start out developing early opinions and find myself changing them as the trees get older. Coral Star had a good size. An oblong shape. It wasn't round like the others. I thought it had average flavor. And one thing I noted about it is that the flowers will double. And this happens in the previous season when the temperatures get hot while flowers are just starting to form in the buds. And it results in double fruit the following season. And this variety did this the worst of all the ones I've had at Highmore. PF17, about the same time, a nice orange color, a freestone, good flavor, tough peel. And this one had low yield, and I suspect it's because the trees were small when I planted them. Glowing Star, I give it a high rating. A little bit later, early September, Labor Day for their ripening dates in Maine might be a little bit later than what they are in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. This one was an attractive one. I thought it had excellent flavor, but a tough peel. Messina was also mid-September. This one was on the small side. Pale yellow flesh, average flavor, thick peel. I'm very picky when it comes to peaches, so your customers might not be as picky as I am. Okay, that's it for peaches. Next, I want to talk about my new favorite apple and why I think it's a great apple and why I think it might not succeed. Several years ago, David Bedford at the University of Minnesota sent me 5 trees. Some of these were supposed to go to Terry Bradshaw, but I guess David Bedford likes me better. We had organic apples back then, and it was intended for organic production because of its superior scab resistance, which it gets from Liberty and Honeycrisp. I've had these trees since 2015, so I've had a chance to do a couple of storage studies with it and taste tests. I like its scab resistance. It's darker in color than Honeycrisp. Moderate vigor. I find that it thins better than Honeycrisp. My Triumph trees are interplanted with Honeycrisp, and we aggressively thin our Honeycrisp, and I think in some cases we're actually over-thinning our Triumphs. I found that it bears consistently from year to year. There might be a slight degree of biennial bearing, but nowhere near as bad as Honeycrisp. One of the things I like about it, it sizes fruit even when the fruit's set in clusters, and it doesn't oversize fruit like Honeycrisp can. And so far I haven't seen any signs of bitter pit. Other disorders, yes, but not bitter pit. Its ripening season would be after Honeycrisp. I think it fits in the same season as McCowan and maybe Cortland. I've done some quality tests where I measure firmness and sugars. The first year I harvested it 3 times, 2 weeks apart, to get an idea of how it would perform over the harvest season. It was relatively firm that year and had fairly high soluble solids or sugars in degrees Brix, much higher than Honeycrisp, and it was able to maintain this through storage. I did find that with the later harvest, it was losing flavor from lack of acidity. So I think its best harvest time is the end of September. I would take the apples out of cold storage 4 months after cold storage. These trees did not get retained or smart fresh, and they were stored at about 34 degrees. They were able to maintain decent quality. So this year I started doing taste tests with Cindy Tong at the University of Minnesota. I sent her apples grown in Maine, 3 varieties, Honeycrisp, Cortland, and Triumph, and she gave these to 117 people in Minnesota. I sent my best Honeycrisp. They were beautiful apples, great flavor, and the consumers in Minnesota rated them as highly as Honeycrisp for overall liking and better than Cortland. But these people liked the way Honeycrisp looked in comparison to Triumph. We found similar results with some of the specialists here at Highmore Farm. So things I don't like about it, the stem bowl russeting, and sometimes it's misshapen compared to other varieties. I don't like the fact that it loses flavor in storage if I harvest it in October. And I see occasional soft scald. Some of its more difficult traits to deal with would be peel greasiness if it's harvested in October and stored too long, and an internal browning disorder that I've also seen in Honeycrisp. This is what it looks like. Light browning of the outer cortex, and I've been measuring the incidence. Picking in mid to late October is the worst thing you can do to get this to develop. I think this apple is going to need to be harvested at the end of September for any kind of storage. Things I haven't seen: no bitter pit or superficial scald or soggy breakdown. Very little senescence and core browning after 4 months. So I think its marketing potential would be later in the season. We have trouble growing very late ripening varieties, so I think this is going to be a good variety for Maine. And I'm not sure if it would be suitable for hard cider, but I like its high soluble solids. I think next year I'm going to start doing some marketing studies. Some of my opinions about plums and market potential have turned out to be wrong. This year I started working with the grower to sell plums that I like in his farm stand. And one of my favorites, Rosy Gage, he actually had trouble giving away. He couldn't sell them. So instead of just relying on my opinion, I'm going to work with the same grower to see how well Triumph compares to some of the other varieties at his stand. So that's all I have for variety testing this year. Does anybody have any questions?
So yeah, this is a good time to highlight. There's one question that's come up in the chat, and I'll do this. If folks have questions, we can do a couple of things. We can post them in the chat, but we can also kind of have a discussion of sort of what this was aimed at. So first, I'll ask the question that's in the chat, and then I've got a question for kind of everyone here. As far as the peaches go, it's for you, Renae. Did the tougher peel help with storage and handling damage in peaches?
I don't have enough peaches to do storage studies yet, but that's in the future. I'm not sure. I think for most of the people who grow peaches in Maine, they'll probably pick them and sell them the same day they harvest them.
Right. So I've got a general question. So we've talked a bit about New York, I'm going back to apples now, Snapdragon, Ruby Frost, Maya. If you think about in the last 30 years ago, the kind of revolutionary breeder was University of Minnesota, coming out with Honeycrisp and Sweet Tango and a number of others. Where do you see Bill, maybe I'll say, or Andre, kind of what are people looking at as far as some of the other varieties that are coming out of there? I mean, we learned a bit about Triumphs, and I do remember that discussion and how I lost my trees. What are we seeing from there?
Yeah, I don't know what else is coming out of there. I mean, the Triumph was the one we've had that we've looked at too, and the good part about it is I like where it picks at, and I think going down the road, I think there'll be more coming out. I think the different breeding programs across the United States that are already established here are looking at a lot of different things. And, I dealt with a lot of the breeding programs at Cornell and MAI both, and a little bit with out west, the one that's out there. And out west, they're shooting for quality and color and fruit size, and the same as Cornell is a little bit more. MAI was a little bit more with the pick your own and farm markets, and I think Minnesota's done the same thing. And they're looking for a home run, but I think some of the things that are going to come out. I think a lot of the apples that were bypassed because of maybe some color issues or some russeting or something. I still think there's quite a few out there that are kind of hidden because they were overlooked because of appearance maybe, and they had the eating quality. So I think people, breeding programs are taking a little different look on too, not only going for appearance but looking for some of the eating qualities and texture.
Yeah, it's like there's a kind of a twofold purpose, between retail and wholesale. And I know Minnesota went back and dug back in the dumpster to kind of pull some stuff out that were initially rejected. Andre, you had a comment on there.
Well, their only other major release after Honeycrisp has been Sweet Tango, as far as I can tell. Zestar is also University of Minnesota, and we had some decent success with it, but it's not It has good eating qualities, but it doesn't store very well, and it doesn't get red very well. It's very kind of opaque green, so it's not a tier 1 variety. We do have some test Minnesota trees on the farm now, and there might be some interesting ones in those, but those will be years down the line. I'm not sure what the plan is for releasing Triumph, though. Does anyone know?
Triumph has been released. Triumph has been released, and it's not a club variety. I think the University of Minnesota did this just to ensure that they maintain their status as a public breeding program.
I know Waffler Nursery this year did budded some trees, so I know it is a general release now. So open.
I've heard from Cindy Tong that they have a new early ripening variety called Rave that is not a general release. I think a big company out west bought the rights to grow that apple.
It's clubbed on the West Coast.
Yeah, and they have, of course, a different focus. I mean, and have for 100 years, which was, cold hardiness in the northern prairie region, essentially. Honeycrisp was a home run and literally an industry changer, and maybe it was a fluke, maybe it wasn't, but I know there's definitely some deep roots there in terms of breeding. I just want to make a point to not count them out. I got a couple questions on the side chat here. Going back to plums and peaches, with limited funding, if a farm desires to have plums and peaches that they have never offered in the orchard, what are tried and tested varieties to recommend for each?
For plums, I'm not sure they're already tried and tested varieties, but anybody who was interested in growing plums, I think they should contact me directly, and I'll help them find varieties best suited to their location and market. But one of the new best plums, it's actually not new, it's an old Ukrainian Russian variety called Obilanaja that Adams County used to sell, but doesn't do well in warmer climates, but has done very well for me. And it was one of the best sellers at the farm market where I tried to sell it this year. Two varieties that I don't recommend are Methley and Shiro because they're prone to splitting. Shiro is very difficult to sell because it doesn't taste or look good. And Methley because it's not fully winter hardy in Maine.
Any quick tips on peaches? I guess anyone could pitch in on this one.
Me.
Well, I only do the variety testing. I don't do the marketing. And if I do get enough peaches to do that, maybe I'll be able to figure that out. But I think with peaches, it's very important to look at ripening date and winter hardiness. You go ahead.
I'd stay away from the early varieties. We've never had success with getting good flavor, size, and not having all of them split pit. So the best flavored varieties are starting in mid-August until mid-September.
Do you have Red Haven?
Yes, we have Red Haven. That's early August, 8th or so.
Okay.
Red Haven is good. It does get mealy if it hangs on the tree a little too long. But it's one of the better, I would call it the start of regular season peaches, not a July peach. We removed all the July peaches here.
Do you have Blushing Star?
Yes, I think we have Blazing Star, Blushing Star, and Glowing Star, I believe, and Coral Star.
So which of those does best at your market?
I like Coral Star the best.
Okay, I've heard the opposite.
The Blazing Star is the first one, correct? And the flavor is not great on it. It's very nice and red, but the flavor is not fantastic on it.
I have two of the Harrow varieties, HW272, and that's one of my favorite peaches, but the fruit size is kind of small. I also have Harrow Beauty, which is more tender, but has much better flavor. They're both September peaches.
So there's a question in here about also on peaches. I'll jump to this to kind of keep that thread going. what do you think the range of, what is the range, I guess, Renae, of the farmers that you target for picking the peaches, and what are kind of the ranges of people should be targeting? I assume this is, yeah, flesh firmness.
I really don't know. Maybe as my trees get older, I'll start to do some post-harvest work. But I tend to pick mine too ripe. But testing harvest dates and firmnesses at harvest is part of the future plan.
Now, Andre, you probably, are you using a pressure tester, or you just let the customer's teeth decide?
No, we don't do any pressure testing, but we recommend the flesh color turning, or the background color turning from green to yellow, and the seam filling out. And then putting the firmer peaches on the bottom of the box, the softer ones on the top. For our store, we've been picking them a little firmer lately because they bruise so easily in the store if you pick them too soft.
I'll keep with the peach thread here going on the side. There's a question about what is the best, and I know you already said you don't like them at all, but the best early peach.
Depends on how early they're talking. Maybe someone else in the audience has had better experience with the early ones.
I don't know that there is a great early peach, but I kind of like Starfire.
Okay, we've got a recommendation there. Let me go back through the thread, make sure I can follow through things. Okay, rootstock. There's a question about what rootstock you had the Triumph on, Renae.
M26.
Yeah.
We need a little bit more vigor here in Maine, and most of our orchards are planted in actually very poor soil. So fully dwarfing rootstocks don't always do that well here.
Okay. And there was a question that came up, which got changed a little bit, about what do your experts think about Cosmic Crisp, and is it suitable for New England? And a comment came up in there about the licensing thereof. I think this brings up a good way to discuss sort of how we talk to consumers about that when they're looking for the Cosmic. Where do you point them? Where do you send them to? Which row, I guess, or which variety?
It depends on when they're coming and asking for Cosmic Crisp, but we do have lots of other apples with a crisp in their name.
Right.
We have Crimson Crisp, we have Honeycrisp, we have Evercrisp. I've eaten some Cosmic Crisp. We probably at trade shows, and they were probably sitting out for too long. They were a little on the soft side, in my opinion. So we'll see how they do in the supermarket.
Well, and I think that that's part of the Honeycrisp effect, where, trying to ride the coattails, everyone's got to put that name in there, whether it's the thing about Honeycrisp is it is a uniquely crisp apple. I mean, the cells are literally different from just about every variety out there. And just because another apple's firm doesn't necessarily mean it's crisp. So yeah, I don't have a good answer in our farm stands aside from whatever apple I want to push that week.
Yeah, we would always encourage them to try something better than Cosmic Crisp that we happen to have.
There was a question about canker on plums. Renae, is that something you could discuss a little bit?
Plums like to, they readily respond to warm temperatures in winter and spring and lose their hardiness before winter's over. And it's usually those branch junctions, the tissue right around where the branch joins the trunk and beneath it. It's a very tender part of the tree. And the cambium and part of the xylem there will be injured if cold temperatures follow warm temperatures. That leads to a canker. It's a fact of life in growing plums, peaches, and cherries.
So you just deal with it. I mean, paint them white, do all the good horticultural things, and expect that you're going to have some probably shorter tree life as a result. Right.
They're not going to live as long as apples and pears. And I've accepted that. It's hard for people to accept the fact that an orchard may only last 7 years like peaches here in Maine. But hopefully with some future breeding, we could get rid of this trait in our stone fruit.
And I'm not sure what the intent of that question was? Because sometimes people say canker, they may be thinking about black knot. So even though that wasn't asked, can we throw
Okay.
that out there?
Plums are susceptible to a fungal disease called black knot, and there's variation among the varieties and species in how susceptible they are. We have black knot at Highmore Farm, and we've had to change our spray program to get rid of it. The variety that I recommend, Obilinaja, has resistance to it. I don't know why Adams County stopped selling it, but that was one of its best traits.
Resistant, like you don't have to manage for the disease. I mean, you manage for other diseases and it gets picked up. You're not spraying specifically for black knot. Not that we have a good spray program in New England that I know of for it anyway.
I don't have to prune out black knot infected limbs off those trees like I do off Methley and some of the other plums, the gauge plums. The European plums are very susceptible to it, but I have to have European plums, so I'm willing to put up with it. I just have to prune it out every year and put on a special fungicide. I don't think Captan's that effective against it.
Okay.
That's in the plum production guide, in our pest management guide for New England, the plum section.
Excellent. A couple questions. We're still on the stone fruit thread. This is good. Question about spring frost and peach tolerance to frost. Whether that's something we test for, and then I'll ask that first.
Here in Maine, we have the ocean effect. So those cold temperatures in spring actually delay the bloom of peaches so that it coincides with apples. So spring frost has not been a problem for me at Highmore Farm. So I haven't had a chance to evaluate the varieties for that trait. But I have noticed that after a severe winter, some of the varieties that still have flower buds have undeveloped flower buds at their base that become developed and provide some fruit for us after a catastrophic winter injury event.
Almost like grapes.
Yeah, Starfire is one of them, and I haven't looked at the others. I'm just getting started on that, but unfortunately, I can't answer the question about spring frost, but I think the Adams County Nursery Catalog lists that trait in their variety evaluation table.
Okay. A lot of stuff coming in on peaches here. So discussion about evaluation of peach varieties for testing against bacterial spot.
The California varieties tend to be very susceptible.
Dry stuff bred in a dry area, right?
Yep. So we try to plant Michigan and Pennsylvania varieties.
Yes, supposedly these varieties have been developed for resistance to bacterial leaf spot. But if you overwhelm them, like doing things that I've done, like plant them next to cherries and plums, they will develop bacterial leaf spot. I see it mostly on the foliage, not so much on the fruit.
Okay, I'll keep coming on with this. Comments about early varieties from John Lyman, well-known grower in Connecticut. Early Star, Flaming Fury, 5D, Garnet Beauty, Glen Glow, and Sentry.
I don't have any experience with those varieties.
Well, you're also talking about a site that's probably 10 or 15 degrees warmer than yours, which kind of changes the calculus.
Some of those varieties are in the New Hampshire variety trial. So maybe next year, Jeremy can give a summary of some of the results that he's finding.
Yeah, we had talked about that amongst us, how he's about one season away from having some good data for Northern New England. So look forward to that in the future. One thing I think that's coming out of this is maybe I shouldn't say this with 85 people online. We're kind of due for a New England variety fact sheet of some sorts to kind of post what's out there. And I think it would be helpful to have growers weigh in, because growers certainly do more variety testing, I think, than any of us, aside from maybe some of the cutting edge stuff. So I think still to come on that. we're really looking at two different streams here, you know, three if you count the plums, and really different, you know, production regions. If we think about with the peaches, you know, pretty much cuts off at a zone, what are zones anymore? I don't know, but zone 5-ish, right? Southern, you know, coastal Maine, Champlain Valley, Vermont, and southern New England, parts of certain parts of New Hampshire. Got another comment on here, early peaches, PF1 in Rich May, Century and Desiree, fill the gap between those and the main season peaches. Any experience in Tangos 2? And I'm not sure what Tangos 2 is.
It's a yellow donut peach. Or no, it's a green donut peach.
It's one of the 4 or 5 varieties out of the Rutgers breeding program. And I only have 2 of those. I think the New Hampshire variety trial might have that one.
We just have Tangos.
Okay.
All right, that was Jeremy with his very quick chiming in before he gives us a more next year. If I were to decide on, let's talk apples first, with a pick your own, next, you know, place my tree order tomorrow. What are the 5 varieties that I should be looking at?
5's not enough.
Okay.
5's not enough because it doesn't spread over the picking season. So
What number do you recommend?
probably 10, just because you want to, I mean, when I set up pick operations here in New York and Ohio and Pennsylvania and around, we tried to fill in picking gaps. So you had some, at least 2 apples ripe every weekend, and just for a setup, you know, and the busiest weekends always between Labor Day and Columbus Day weekend. So, you know, Honeycrisp fits the gap there, you know, so Honeycrisp would be one. I like the Sweet Maya to start out with early. I know a lot of people are planting Premier to get it even earlier. So if you go the other way, it's difficult if you're going to pick 5 because I still like the traditional varieties. But going forward, if you're planting some of the newer varieties, I do like Evercrisp, which is really late, and then filling the gap there with some early Pink Lady, some Barnsby Pink Lady, but still leaves you a gap in the middle there. So you got to pick something. And I like Snapdragon to fit in there. So if that was one that people could plant if they could afford it or get enough trees, that would be a good one to fit in the middle.
Andre, what's in your order?
It's hard to narrow it down that much. I mean, Honeycrisp is obviously going to be in there. So my dad's texted me here too, saying, don't give out too much information.
Give it up, Mo.
All right, we're getting another couple of questions, and maybe this would be a good one to kind of wrap things up on here. As things are changing a little bit in terms of how we produce things and how we grow trees, it opens up more opportunities to try some different production techniques, and we're moving away from varieties right now. String trimmer, you know, string thinning. What's sort of the status of that? I think we'll be talking about that at an upcoming one of these later in March, excuse me. But thoughts on that, since this is something that's adaptable to both peaches and apples?
So all our peaches are planted to quad V systems, and we have the peach Darwin string thinner, but we don't use it that much. I've always been a little disappointed on how much it strips off all the flowers on one branch and doesn't touch the next branch. So, and we do a pretty good job of pruning the trees to place the branches going horizontally down the row. But you have to have a good stomach for seeing branches like that out in the orchard.
Renae, you want to give a quick peek into string thinning?
I don't have as much experience as he does, but I did use the string thinner once in one of the Ricker Hill orchards in a year where we had an overabundance of bloom and we really needed to knock it down. And I loved how little time it took. He did the whole orchard in less than half an hour, and he still had too many peaches. So in my orchards, well, they're not pruned and set up like that. So I've been using that toilet brush on a stick contraption, which works great for the top branches, but I need to do a better job of pruning to stiffen the branches. So I've been finding that stripping the blossoms by hand is actually easier than using that contraption. And I do agree with Andre's comments about how it's very uneven in thinning if your trees aren't perfectly trained and adapted to the string thinner.
Yeah, there was a comment in the side here that the Darwin PT 250 takes half the work out of hand thinning. So maybe if you go through the light coat, you're still a fair amount of adjustment to be done. There's a thing that popped in at the end here about cherries.
Walter Goss was thinking the same thing I'm thinking. I wanted to ask people what they thought of the potential for cherries in New England.
Well, what John Clements always says is if you want to plant, well, he says you better have to plant Honeycrisp than plant cherries. And I would agree. We have 5 acres of cherries, and man, we've made money on them 1 year. We've had them for 20 years. They could be pretty frustrating, and you have to have a lot of patience with them. And I wish I could find a variety I could recommend, but they all have downsides.
There's always next year, Andre.
Yeah, thanks.
Say that every year, right? Yeah, I mean, you can grow a tart cherry all day long. You just can't sell it. And you could sell a sweet cherry any day, but it's hard to grow it. So.
And then there's winter hardiness issues and poor pollination and rain cracking birds, you name it.
We grow sweet cherries. Actually, our farm manager, Greg Kohler, grows the sour cherries. And we found a grower who's willing to machine harvest them, and we've found a nice market for them. Either the local Amish will strip the trees, or a brewery will take them. So we're actually looking to expand our cherries.
Tart cherries.
I prefer sweet cherries myself, and I really like the fact that we now have some dwarf cherries and rain cracking resistant varieties. Our climate might actually be better for getting trees to live a little bit longer because of our colder winters, to keep the trees dormant through the season when they're at danger of developing cankers and dying. But
okay, so to be continued.
I don't have to sell them. I just have to eat them. Excellent.
Well, I think we've kind of just cracked the door on that cherries. We'll cover that in a little bit here. I want to thank the three of you and everyone else who's chimed in, and look forward to continuing this conversation with the other webinars, continuing with disease management next week.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
See you next time.